Killen began last week in Philadelphia, Mississippi. On Monday, he was convicted of organizing the 1964 murders of 3 civil rights workers who traveled to the South that year to register African-American voters during the Mississippi Freedom Summer. We'll show you now the sentence handed down today. This is 15 minutes.
All rise. Court will now come to order.
Have a seat. Good morning. Gentlemen, the sentencing of Edgar Ray Killen is set this morning for 10 o'clock. Is there anything that I need to go into before I go into the sentencing phase of this trial? Those of you who've never been judged do not understand the problems that a sentencing judge has at this stage of the trial. It's so easy throughout the trial of the case to hear the evidence and rule on matters of law. But when it comes to sentencing, it's a different thing. I've been judged for 26 years, and it's one of the most difficult things you'll ever do. And in all the years that I've sentenced persons, I've never really learned how to do it. Cases are different, the parties are different, the crimes are different. So many factors and matters that I must take in consideration. I've never really learned how to do it. I've just done what I thought was the best thing to do in keeping with the law, my oath, my responsibility to my oath to the people and to the defendant that's before me. Now, Edgar Ray Killen was indicted for the crime of murder, for the murder of 3 persons, for a crime that occurred in June of 1964. 41 years later, we have this trial where he now is before the court. He being presented to the court on the issue of whether or not he was guilty of the crime of murder. The jury, in hearing all the evidence that was presented, the law that was available for the case, did not find Edgar Ray Killen guilty of murder, but instead found him guilty of the crime of manslaughter regarding counts 1, 2, and 3. The manslaughter instruction was given at the request of Mr. Mark Duncan and Mr. Jim Hood as a lesser included offense, and manslaughter is a lesser included offense of the crime of murder, and upon a request by the prosecuting attorneys in such a case, that is the law, that the instruction should be given. So it was given, and the jury, in making this decision, having heard the evidence, did not find Mr. Killen guilty of murder, but found him guilty of manslaughter. The jury deliberated on this issue for some time, and if you question their decision, then you are voiding the belief in the jury system. The persons who served on that jury did not volunteer for that service. They were commanded by an order of the court to be here to serve as jurors. They were summoned here from the 4 corners of Neshoba County, and they qualified as jurors because I asked of them the questions I was required by law to ask. And upon the completion of that, the 12 jurors who were selected qualified as proper citizens of this county and legally competent to serve as jurors. You also have to remember that the 12 jurors were chosen by these parties. They had peremptory challenges, and they did challenge jurors, and the 12 who served was not challenged by either Mr. Killen or by the state of Mississippi, but was seated and impaneled and given an oath to make a true verdict upon the evidence in the law regarding the case of the state of Mississippi versus Edgar Ray Killen. Now, they must live with this decision. No doubt they have it. They may be subjected to some criticism. They may be subjected to some abuse and some ridicule. Yet you just have to remember that they are citizens who were here to perform an unpleasant duty, and they did so. And I respect those persons, and you, all of you, who are critical of the judgment of the jury, those of you who believe that the jury should have found Mr. Killen not guilty, and those of you who believe that the finding of verdicts of manslaughter was wrong, and they should have found the persons guilty of murder, you have to remember that no doubt, and there's no question about it, these persons attempted to follow the evidence to the best of their ability. They're not trained persons. You know, I dare say that if they had been polled, there's not a single one of the 12 who has ever before served as a juror. I watched court TV the other day, and I saw where the people of Neshoba County and the jury and even the state of Mississippi was demeaned because the verdict was manslaughter and not that of murder. And that was wrong. And that was, again, attacking the integrity of the jury system. And certainly, you must believe that that's the one thing that we must have, is so that innocent people, people who have no purpose in mind but to be fair and impartial and make a judgment upon evidence. And after all is said and done, there's not a single person in this courtroom who drove here today fearful for their life or afraid that they would suffer some physical harm. And the reason for that is because someone in Neshoba County, as jurors, appeared here on other criminal cases and followed the law and enforced the laws so that all of you could be protected. You'll leave here today protected and secure that you're not going to be harmed, and it's because the laws have been followed and enforced by the people of Neshoba County. I have been the judge for 23 years. I've made a lot of decisions. I've made a lot of decisions that affected the lives and liberty of persons. And that's my job. And this morning, just a few moments ago in chambers there, I offered to the lawyers here, would you like to go in there now and take a seat and make a judgment on Mr. Killen and what, on the evidence of this case and what should be the penalty? And there's not a taker of my offer. Now, you have to remember that I have a job to do, and I have to pass upon a sentence to a person who's 80 years old, a person who has suffered a serious injury, a person that could receive the maximum sentence of 60 years. There are those of you in the courtroom who would say that a sentence of 10 years is a life sentence. There's those of you who serve in the courtroom, no doubt, are of the opinion that Edgar Ray Killen should be sentenced to serve 60 years. Now, if this case had occurred and there was only one person, this is a homicide case where three persons was killed. The distinction is that of murder and manslaughter, really and truly only in the eyes of punishment. Because the facts are more or less the same, the difference is 20 years or life imprisonment. If there had only been one person killed, and Edgar Ray Killen was sentenced to serve 20 years in 1964, I don't think there would be one person who would say that that was an excessive sentence. But now today, 40 years later, when Mr. Killen is 80 years old, and we would consider the fact that 3 persons were killed, is 60 years an excessive sentence. Now, the law does not make a distinction in the crime. The sentence, should a person 20 years old receive a more severe sentence than a person 80 years old? If so, why? Why should there be a recognition of punishment? Does not the law recognize, it does not recognize the distinction of age. It does not say that a person who is 80 years old should receive a lesser sentence than a person who is 20 years old. And as I believe Mr. Killen to have been in the year of 1964, something like 62 years old. So I have made a decision, and I know that the decision of courts, of course, may be criticized because a lot of people really don't understand. But if you give it an understanding that all we're trying to do is do what's right under the law and the facts of the case. So it's my responsibility to make that decision, and I have done it, and that's because it's my job. Before I announce the sentence of Mr. Killen, I do want to say that I want to express my public opinion and appreciation to law enforcement who has provided the security and have assisted the court in handling this case. My clerk, Patty Lee, who has been most helpful, my law clerks, the attorneys in this case for the defense and the state. They've been courteous, they've been professional, and they performed their job. Edgar Killen, come around. Bring Mr. Killen around from the bench. No one has talked to me attempting to persuade me of what sentence to pronounce, because I think that they understand that I would not tolerate that. I'll not tolerate any person to come to me and offer that Mr. Killen should be placed on house arrest or should receive 60 years. That's something that I've heard the evidence of this case, and I'm just the kind of guy that'll butt with my own head. And I take no pleasure at all in pronouncing sentence. The 3 gentlemen who was killed, each life has value, and each life is equally as valuable as the other life, and I have taken that into consideration. That there are 3 lives involved in this case, and the 3 lives should absolutely be respected and treated equally. Therefore, Edgar Killen, in count 1, it's a sentence of this court that you serve 20 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections. In count 2, it's a sentence of this court that you serve 20 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with this sentence to run consecutive to the sentence pronounced upon you in count 1. In count 3, it's a sentence of this court that you serve 20 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with this sentence to run consecutive to the sentences pronounced upon you in counts 1 and 2. Gentlemen, do you have any comment? Now, as I've announced to you, Monday of next week, I'll hear any motions that you might have. Those motions will be heard at 9 o'clock. Mr. Killen, you're submitted to the custody of the sheriff of Neshoba County.